Welcome, everyone. My name is Kenny Aragon, and I will be moderating this session, Sakai's Accessibility Between Now and a WCAG Compliance Statement. Before we begin, I'll just go over a few things. This session is being recorded. You will receive an email announcement once the recordings are available. If you have any questions or comments throughout the session, please type them into the chat area, or if you have a microphone, feel free to ask your questions or make comments aloud. However, we do ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking in order to avoid any extra background noises. The presenter for the session is Matt Clare. Matt Clare is a Canadian educator, technologist, Brock University instructor, and the current chair of the Sakai Accessibility Working Group. He currently works for Brock University in the Center for Pedagogical Innovation. All right, Matt, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. If you can hear me, and I'm sure you're Kenny as well, but if you can hear me, I'd just love to get a confirmation in the chat room. And also, I wouldn't mind if you're familiar with the chat room. Make sure you type something in there if you need me to stop or clarify something, or just want to ask a question. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate that. Okay, so the plan for today is an overview about Sakai's accessibility and the Accessibility Working Group. Basics of what is accessibility. I'm going to go over Sakai's rally plan. Consider I'll ask you to consider the CK Sources Accessibility Checker, and time permitting, and it may not be permitting, I've got some examples and demos of different experiences that individuals with disabilities may have when they use Sakai, as far as technologies and alternate interfaces, because I know not everyone has had the opportunity to experience those situations. So the Accessibility Working Group is one of the many working groups in Sakai. Our focus is accessibility. We have identified a set of standards that we wish to meet, and that is WCAG Level 2A, which I'll explain more of. But if you are someone that's familiar with WCAG 2 or WCAG 2, I'm going to drop a little question in the chat room, and if that makes sense to you, is your institution has opted to and or is legally mandated to provide content that meets WCAG 2. If you know that now, throw a +1 in or a yes, and I'd be interested to know. And if you don't know what that is, more in a moment. So our working group tracks accessibility issues, writes out JIRAs, which is Sakai's kind of bug tracker and issue tracker. We work to resolve issues as we can and help with the accessibility documentation. We meet every other Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, and we meet through a big blue button in Perio's room 4. Oh, and we use the Sakai Dev mailing list to keep in touch. Our next meeting is actually November 9th at 1 o'clock Eastern, and then there's our next 3 after that for the rest of the calendar year. I'm jumping in on the chat. That's interesting insight. So here's an interesting graphic on accessibility. The kind of hashtag colloquialism around accessibility is often A11Y. So it's the 11 letters in the middle of accessibility shortened down to A11Y. In a 140 character world, it's helpful to have little short forms like that. And so that's one introduction there to some terminology. I promised to explain WCAG 2, and no one was jumping in the chat room identifying that they're already working with WCAG 2, so I want to make sure we explain that. WCAG 2 is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2. It's international and more stringent than things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, AODA Section 508. It was developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, applies to more than just HTML, and was adopted by Ontario's AODA, the IITA, which is an international standard. I'm forgetting at the moment. There goes my notes. And the California Department of Education also uses it as a measure of the institutions that they are responsible for. It's also used as a measure in the recent US-based lawsuits around accessibility, including the MIT one. And there's a link there. You're able to follow to get a summary of those issues. Pardon the font. So WCAG 2 is an agreed-upon international standard. It's been adopted by legislation in some areas and is a measure across projects. When we look at how the WCAG is designed and WCAG 2 is designed, and what we think about when we talk about accessibility online, it really stems from the POUR principle. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So information, it's perceivable if it's presented to users in ways that they can perceive, they can understand, they can take in that information through the senses that are available to them. Operable, user interface components and navigations instructors can be operated by individual using the means that they are familiar and capable of using. Understandable, information is set up in structures and outlines that make sense or coherent, not just to one sense, but to all the senses that we need to develop our content for. And robust. Content must be robust enough so it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of technologies, including assistive technologies. Interesting thing about the POUR principle is this is a great way to design web content for accessibility and has proven to be a great way to design web content for mobile, for other different new interfaces. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust are good principles for creating content in almost any format and have benefits for more than just accessibility. So those are the foundational ideas here. An update on the rally plan. So the rally plan is Sakai's review accessibility plan. And so we picked up A11Y, often pronounced Ali, and turned it into rally by putting review in front of it. Don't think too much about the nomenclature there, but that's the title we came up with. And this is our rally plan for Sakai, which we're in the second phase of now. So the plan was to, and is, to review and identify some of the existing resources we had to assess Sakai's accessibility and build upon those, and also to, if we need more information, to gather that information. That was in the form, it took the form of commissioning an audit of Sakai 11. Once that review was done, and we're in our second step here, where we identified the issues, made JIRA, Sakai's issue tracking system, identifying them and describing them, and start to work to enhance Sakai based on those items. And then our third and final step is to generate a VPAT, which is a voluntary product accessibility template statement, and the WCAG certification statement, so that current and future adopters of Sakai can be assured of its accessibility before it's given to their end users or people who would use it, and knowing that there's the confidence that it is accessible. So both to make it accessible and to demonstrate that it's accessible reliably. We had to do fundraising for that, and we're great benefactors of contributions both financially and through some development time for a number of sources. Hopefully you can spot them on their screen there. Funds and hard work were greatly appreciated from Durham Tech, Tufts, Oxford, Pepperdine, Longsight, Marist, Brock University, Dr. Charles Servants, University of Virginia, and many more. And I do want to be clear that Sakai does do a pretty good job today. It has benefited from a legacy of developers and others considering the accessibility as they created, but it's important to both improve and understand newer developments, and in a situation where rightfully, institutions want to be assured of the accessibility before they adopt web technologies. Sakai needs to be able to give that assurance, and we want to be able to meet that expectation. So what we did for the Rally project, we reviewed the 17 most common Sakai tools based on previous usage surveys and some consultations with the Sakai Accessibility Working Group. And 40 specific static items within those tools were reviewed, as well as 20 tasks within those items. We hired the consultancy SSB BART, which is Respected Accessibility Reviewer, to do that review work and issue a report. So here's the timeline of how the Rally project's gone so far. In 2015, at the Sakai Perio conference in, I believe it was Miami, the concept really started to get moving. We received our funding pledges by late August, considered a number of vendors. Contract was signed with SSB BART to do the review in January 2016. In around June of 2016, the audit results were received, and that was done against a yet to release version of Sakai 11, hosted by Marist, who gave us a nice steady location to give for review and track changes on. That was our first phase of our project. And as of August 2016, work has begun on resolving those issues. So we're working right now with institutions and individuals doing development work and review work to address the issues identified by SSB BART across Sakai. And as that work continues and as it gets incorporated into Sakai 11, possibly 12, it really is that's a timing beyond this project, but either version will get the benefits. Then we'll ask SSB BART to do a final review and issue a compliance statement. And that compliance statement hopefully says great things about Sakai and gives everyone confidence. But most importantly, at that point, issues will have been resolved and measurable change will be available to people using current versions of Sakai. So I'm going to just pause there and take a glance at the chat room, see if there's any questions or things I can clarify. All right. Thanks, Dave, for the appreciation for the timeline. I want to thank everyone who contributed to this project along the way, both in their individual work and their and the fundraising. One thing that this experience has demonstrated is that there's a lot of interest in accessibility, and it's something that the community really wants to do well at, individually and larger institutions. And this project's really benefited from being a project. The will is always there. So phase one, we raised $61,000 American and got that fully funded. The majority of that was to commission the audit. We're currently in our second phase. We have an estimate, a really crude estimate, about $30,000 worth of development time needed. But even better than money to contract developers is actual developers to do the work. So that $30,000 number need not be considered so large if, and it isn't that large, because we have been the benefactor of some volunteer development from the broader community. We'll need to raise at least $11,500 to commission that final WCAG certification statement, and that moment will come soon. We are a farm project, one of the two initial farm projects. If you don't know about farm, a great presentation earlier today, and it's a useful and exciting way and meaningful way for projects in the Apereo community to be launched and coalesce around. So here's our preliminary results for our audit of Sakai 11. Finally, at almost halfway through the presentation, I get to tell you we are 76% compliant with WCAG level AA across the items measured. So that's good. I haven't seen too many accessibility reports myself, but SSB BART assures us we're doing well. But everyone would want to see 100%, if not certainly improvements from our initial state. And hopefully that will be happening soon. 452 issues were identified by SSB BART's reviewers who are using JAWS, automated testing, and other manual forms of testing, JAWS being a screen reader, pardon me. And that was condensed into JIRA items, JIRA issues, issue tracker for Sakai development and other items. And that has been an interesting process to get such a large report into something the community can work with. And now we've made that transition. We've got individuals who you can see on your screen there who are working through the issues that were identified. Some were simple and small. Others are huge and require a lot of consideration. But progress is nonetheless happening. And if anyone is interested and capable of taking a look at these issues, I would encourage you to head over to JIRA and search for the Rally label, R11Y. And there's a full description of the issues, our progress. And if you're an individual or someone knows someone who can work in that code, that'd be amazing. If you are someone who is trying to understand the issue and is perplexed by it, leaving comments that directions aren't clear or the concern isn't well articulated is just as valuable, because we want to build up the information so that every item of discussion around an issue helps us build toward a solution. So we value that in any form. So those 453 instances, the trends that we've identified are some issues around screen reader specific content, the old school methods, and forgive my cascading style sheets talk, but the old school method of hiding content from a screen reader by setting display to none is actually not the correct practice. It seems initially intuitive that if you wanted to hide web page content from something that's going to read the text, someone who would visually perceive the text but have it available to the computer to read aloud, then setting display to none would seemingly make sense, because we've not displayed it on screen and someone who's visually perceiving the site can't see it. But hidden instructions, like how instructions that make clear what is displayed visually, but someone who can't perceive that would need additional directions. So you're targeting a screen reader maybe on an interface item or a layout concern. A helpful thing for accessibility. If you set that to not be displayed, the modern and literal screen readers don't read them either, because the instruction was to not include that in the contents of the page. Plus, dynamic websites use the ability to hide and display content for other purposes than just trying to communicate with a screen reader. So it's actually a bad practice, an ineffective practice, and some work on targeting screen readers' instructions in Sakai is not being effective, because modern screen readers ignore it literally dutifully. So we got some good guidance that we should be rendering that content off the visual screen, but nonetheless available to be read. So it's not visually perceived, but it is displayed, just kind of hidden on the page, under something, away from something, and the screen reader can read that. So we've identified that issue and are working to solve it. Another issue or trend was that early versions of Sakai 11 and some items still in Sakai 11.1 and 2, the color contrast was too low. Color spelled correctly there. So that's important for people with low vision, to make sure that they can perceive the items displayed. And the majority of people who are legally blind still have some some vision, and anecdotally, I know more blind users of websites that prefer to zoom than use a screen reader. And so I wouldn't want anyone to assume that a blind user doesn't have any visual perception. That legal distinction versus ability to perceive visually is not directly linked. So things like color contrast and ability to zoom are important, and that color contrast is being corrected now in Sakai 11. Issues in Samigo, Tests and Quizzes. Tests and Quizzes has some unlabeled items, some form items, and Tests and Quizzes is one big form that aren't marked up properly as to describe the content that the student is being asked to respond to, which is a shame because the types of labeling that are needed, for example, in the multiple choice question, that labeling, the information is right there. It's the potential response to distractors to the question, to the original stem. That is written on the page because it's not marked up properly. Individuals using screen readers or with low precision in their ability to use a pointing device can't benefit from the better labeled markup that forms are supposed to have to meet that standard for important reasons. There are a number of issues of sign-up tool and ARIA roles, which we'll get into in a bit, and keyboard navigation. So this is a simple summary with a GIF of the Chromebox screen reader moving through Sakai 11. And this was an issue introduced in Morpheus where the markup didn't allow someone to use keyboard navigation to target the individual elements of the site title, item, link in the sites drawer. The drop-down for tools and the title itself were one area, and they needed to be separated into two different areas or actions because the title and the drop-down for tools serve two purposes. So this was a simple oversight, a markup issue, which is being solved now. And there's a GIF that kind of animation that walks you through that with the Chromebox assistive web technology to speak it aloud. And you can see in the bottom right there is my keyboard and the keyboard actions that are being used to navigate through that. Issue 31610, indicating focus. So the WCAG requires that site keyboard only users be provided with visual indication of which element has focus as they navigate through the page. And this is an example from resources. So we're working as a accessibility working group to figure out what the best practice is here. The web browsers provide some indication of focus visually. You can see that indication in Chrome here as I press the tab key to move through that. And but there's a requirement to make sure that structurally all the actionable items, ironically in this case it's the actions for that resource item, pardon the confused terminology, all of the things that the user can select and change need to have visual focus indicated. And in Sakai 11's resources tool, if you do focus on the actions item, there is no indication visually of that focus, which is important because it is kind of a complex tool and it has a number of action items within it. So we wouldn't want to preclude someone who was using keyboard navigation to not be able to access those tools. So we're working to figure out how to address that. So that's my summary of the rally plan. I'm, again, encouraging you to check out our farm project page. Help us either through consideration contributions or other means that could help us get towards our goal of a WCAG certification statement for Sakai. I'm going to pause one more time to see if there's any questions about the rally plan, some of the issues that I highlighted, or the general question of what is between Sakai today and WCAG compliance statement before we move on to some possible examples. Casting my eyes to the chat room. So good question about off-screen versus display none. So that's a little bit of a technical style sheet kind of information, but I don't think it's incomprehensible technical. So a dynamic website that has content that can load that can change on the page without having to reload the website entirely, can hide content and set it to be not displayed, and then through JavaScript or other means make it displayed on request. So that's important intended functionality in the web page that everyone who uses a dynamic website, Sakai being what, a dynamic website, benefits from. In an earlier era, semi-intuitively, one might think that if you wrote up a bunch of instructions on the website that said, hello, screen reader user, this page is laid out in 4 columns, heads up, when you get towards the second, you can jump right to the end using this interface, whatever hypothetical scenario. Kind of intuitive if you think that a computer would be reading that to a user, then if you set it to display none, people who don't need those types of instructions won't see them. But people who need those instructions because they can't see or have low visibility would have them read to them by a computer. Unfortunately, screen readers interpret the do not display as do not read, because in my first example of a dynamic website, it's really important that a screen reader not read content not intended to be presented at all or presented at a different time. Initially, that seemed intuitive. That's how Sakai was designed. But as screen readers got more literal to reflect a more dynamic web, that became a complication. So now it hide off screen. And thank you for acknowledging the answer. That is a tricky one to figure out. Other questions? Because that was a great one. Is your focus mainly on students or both students and instructor use? Our focus is mainly on students because they're our most important constituency. And so that's where we're mostly focusing. And those are guidance from SSB BART. But the other thing is Sakai's legacy and the way Sakai works is the student interface is better than the instructor interface, because everyone who's approached Sakai's accessibility has taken the approach that student-facing is more important than instructor-facing because of the impact and the size of that user group. So we continue to review student-facing in our selection of 17 tools and 20 tasks, but most of the user-facing was on newer tools, and we did continue to do instructor or beyond student interface because that's actually the most complicated, the most feature-rich side of Sakai, and also the least reviewed, because understandably, past versions of Sakai have taken the same student-first focus. Hopefully that answers your question, Andrew. Thank you for it. Okay. So I wanted to give a quick demo of the CK Source Accessibility Checker. If you are familiar, make a little mark in the chat room if you wouldn't mind. If you however you'd like to indicate, if you know what CK is, if you know what the CK Source Accessibility Checker is, that would be cool too. One person familiar. Okay. I wanted to highlight it because I think it's a interesting and meaningful way to make your Sakai accessibility better. If not today, then a restart away from today. Sakai, CK Source is the company that's behind the CK editor, the WYSIWYG editor in Sakai, as of, I believe, 2.9 is default. They have created an accessibility checker, and it is freely available, and it's compatible with Sakai's technology. It's not compatible with Sakai's license. So it's an interesting situation. CK Source has picked up the Quail library of accessibility testing, which is used in many projects. It's a great library, but it's just a testing regime. So what CK Source did was made a spell checker for accessibility, an accessibility checker that works like a spell checker. So here's their interface. I can say that at Brock University, we have this implemented in our version of Sakai 10.6-ish. And it's not mandatory, but it's there as a way to test out the Sakai, the content you author in Sakai to see if it's accessible and do quick fixes. There's an example here of a image without an alternative text describing it for people who may not visually perceive it. And so if you just click the checker button, it runs this check across Sakai. It is licensed in a GPL license, which means it can't be distributed with Sakai. We had a dialogue, myself, our group, and the CK Source company. They've chosen a different license than what is compatible with Sakai's Educational Community License 2, which is, of course, their right, but unfortunately means we can't distribute with Sakai. But any institution could choose to integrate it into their Sakai system, and there's a description on the website for the Sakai Accessibility Working Group that highlights how it can be added to your local version of Sakai. And thanks to Matt Jones Longsight, who did the implementation work on behalf of either Brock or our group, whichever one you want to interpret that as. Skipping to the good stuff. So here's my sample content in Brock Sakai system, and pressing that button indicates that there's no issues of accessibility in this text I've typed in. So I'm going to make some. Hopefully you can see that. I think I can zoom and improve that for you. And running the checker again. It highlights that these items I typed in with just an asterisk in front of them should be made into a list, having structural elements like listed items that are visually as list as a list in HTML helps users using alternative navigation to jump through lists to start from the top and the bottom. And so the accessibility checker has identified these for me and is offering to fix them for me. So there's a quick fix to spot that I had bullets, and this list of numbers at the start of my line, it spotted that and said, this is probably a numbered list. Why don't you make that into a numbered list to help people perceive it? Oh. So that's the accessibility checker by CK Source. It is, again, open, just not compatible with Sakai Community Source License 2. But I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity or means to perhaps mix that into your local Sakai institution, I think the benefits are really big and reflects the spirit that people have around making sure that their Sakai system, their content, can be perceived and is universally accessible to all people using it. and the distance between that and there is just knowing what to do, what changes to make. And CK Source's accessibility checker allows people to both check that and incrementally discover the kinds of things that would make their content better. So we're coming up at the end of our time here. So there's a link to the information about how it can be added to anyone's copy of Sakai. Here's a quick list of the tools that I often use for checking out accessibility: the Firefox accessibility extension, the Screen Reader emulator, or Chromebox, a free screen reader, our MVA's free screen reader for Windows. We have a full list in our group site, and of course, others may use JAWS or VoiceOver. Here's my contact details. We'd love to have you out at the accessibility working group call next Wednesday, at 1, and watch Sakai Definite mailing list. Here's my contact information if you ever want to reach out. And I'll pause there just to see if there's any summative kind of concerns or questions that you may want to voice or identify or ask about. You're welcome to show up to the call, watch the Sakai Dev mailing list for an agenda, which will come out about 24 hours in advance. And you're welcome to show up. We get a mix of skills from people who are concerned, people who have more of that HTML and up perspective, and people who have that HTML and down perspective. We get all kinds of skill sets, and I set out an agenda in advance and take suggestions, but the most important thing is whoever shows up, that's the kind of things we talk about. Thanks, Lexi. And I should be reading back these questions because others may not have seen them. I think that one's evident. All right, well, I'll give my thanks again. There's all my contact information. And I do thank again everyone who's contributed to the rally plan and accessibility across Sakai, and also for all of you who've joined us today. And I'll see you around the conference. And I'll let everyone run for the door if they'd like, but Francois is asking about, are there any guidelines for new development? Other than the WCAG 2 standard, we don't have any guidelines. We'd love to be able to say, if you're using Java server faces or a Wicket, do these things. Unfortunately, the skills aren't quite there in our group to describe that, and it's kind of a moving target. But that is a need, and myself and people at NeoCaden are often on the hunt for a solution to that challenge you identified, Francois. So it's a good concern. Michael is asking, how does accessibility initiative differentiate Sakai from other LMSs and other systems? What are they doing? And could this, oh, there goes my screen there. Could this serve as a selling point for faculty? I hope so. I hope it can serve as a selling point for faculty. Other LMSs do provide a WCAG statement. I haven't done the comparison this year, but most of the commercial major ones do have a WCAG statement. They are positive, but there are some caveats in those too. They aren't 100% compliance. When I checked over a year ago, Moodle only had a VPAT, but I'm sure that, like Sakai, other open projects have different commercial affiliates and implementations and just individuals who could attest to better accessibility. So I do think it's a competitive concern for Sakai, and if we have a clear and coherent WCAG statement, it's commercially or competitively good for Sakai. But as far as a comparison, not having one is an issue right now. And where we'd be at the end of this, I think, is definitely at the top end of the spectrum, but direct comparisons I'm not current on. And that's our time. Thank you, Michael.
All right, Matt, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Sounds good. Thank you.